Consider this story, and just FYI, this is not part of your notes. So remember, there are some slides that are not included in your notes, and that's okay, they're more story-based. So imagine being 21-year-old Ben Carpenter, who experienced the world's wildest and fastest wheelchair ride. As he crossed the street, the light changed, and a semi-truck started moving into the intersection. When they bumped, Ben's wheelchair handles got stuck in the truck's grill. The driver, who hadn't seen Ben and couldn't hear his cries for help, took off down the highway, pushing the wheelchair at 50 miles per hour until reaching his destination 2 miles away. Extreme stress. From the audio recording of a 911 caller reporting Ben Carpenter's distress, you are not going to believe this. There is a semi-truck pushing a guy in a wheelchair on Red Arrow Highway. What is stress? So, stress is the process by which we perceive and respond to certain events called stressors that we appraise as threatening or challenging. How are a stressor and a stress reaction related to stress? A stressor is the terrifying truck ride that Ben took. That is what a psychologist would identify as a stressor. The stress reaction would be Ben's physical and emotional responses, and the process by which Ben related to that threat was actually called stress. How does appraisal of an event affect our stress reaction? According to psychologist Richard Lazarus, stress arises from events themselves, less from events themselves than from how we appraise, which is perceive or explain them. So for example, one person alone in a house ignores its creaking sounds and experiences no stress. Someone else, however, suspects an intruder and becomes alarmed. One person regards a new job as a welcome challenge. Someone else appraises it as risking failure. What is stress appraisal? So the events of our lives flow through a psychological filter. How we appraise an event influences how much stress we experience and how effectively we respond to that. So, stressful event could be a tough math test. It could be appraised as, yikes, this is beyond me, or yay, I've got to apply all I know. And the response, stressed to distraction or aroused and focused. How can short-lived or challenging stress have positive outcomes? So a momentary stress can mobilize the immune system for fending off infections and healing wounds. Championship athletes, successful entertainers, motivated students, great teachers, and leaders all thrive and excel when aroused by a challenge. Experiencing some stress early in life builds resilience. How can extreme or prolonged stress harm us? Stress can trigger risky decisions and unhealthy behaviors. Pregnant women with overactive stress systems tend to have shorter pregnancies, which pose health risks for their infants. And when facing stress, people may smoke or drink. What are three main categories of stress? Catastrophes, significant life changes, and daily hassles. And we're going to go over what each of those mean and some applications. So catastrophes are large, unpredictable, large-scale events like earthquakes, floods, wildfires, storms. After such events, damage to emotional and physical health can be significant. And this is a picture of the 2010 Haiti earthquake. How do catastrophes impact physical and emotional health? In the 4 months after Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans' suicide rate reportedly tripled. And in surveys taken in the 3 weeks after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, 58% of Americans said they were experiencing greater than average arousal and anxiety. A similar uptick in health issues from heart problems to suicides immediately followed the 2011 terrorist attacks in Norway. Significant life changes. Many significant life changes happen during young adulthood. Life transitions, having a loved one die, a friend move away, a favorite aunt and uncle getting a divorce, are often keenly felt. Even happy events such as graduating high school or leaving home for college can be stressful life situations. How does age impact stress? So a Gallup Healthways survey of more than 650,000 Americans during 2008 and 9 found daily stress highest among younger adults. Daily hassles. Every day we wake up to alarms that were not set teachers that require more from us, friends that are in bad moods, and cars that won't start. Daily hassles can cover just about anything that impedes your progress on a task, reroutes your plans, or causes you aggravation or anxiety. Dead cell phones, aggravating siblings, too many things to do could be daily hassles. So could having to give a public speech or do difficult math problems. What's an example of how stress is studied? And this little chunk is not in your notes. Participants chew gum so that collecting saliva is easy. Researchers take a saliva sample from each participant at the beginning of the experiment to measure levels of the stress hormone cortisol. Participant gives simulated job interview speech to a critical panel. Next, a participant is asked to complete difficult math problems out loud. And measuring cortisol in participants' saliva before and after tells us that although they enter the lab experiencing some stress, that level goes up 40% after they experience the social stress. How does the research team conclude the research? The research team thanks and debriefs the participant, explaining the purpose of the experiment and the role she played. How do we respond and adapt to stress? When alerted by any of a number of brain pathways, the sympathetic nervous system arouses us, preparing the body for the adaptive response Walter Cannon called fight or flight. It increases the heart rate and respiration, diverts blood from digestion to the skeletal muscles, dulls feelings of pain, and releases sugar and fat from the body's stores. How do the adrenal glands work to affect stress responses? The adrenal glands, the inner part, helps trigger the fight or flight response. And physiologists have identified an additional stress response system. On orders from the cerebral cortex via the hypothalamus and pituitary gland, the outer part of the adrenal gland secretes glucocorticoid stress hormones, such as cortisol. What is the General Adaptation Syndrome, or GAS? Canadian scientist Hans Selye's 40 years of research on stress extended Cannon's findings. His studies of animals' reactions to various stressors, such as electric shock and surgery, helped make stress a major concept in both psychology and medicine. Selye proposed that the body's adaptive response to stress is so general that, like a single burglar alarm, it sounds no matter what intrudes. He named this response the General Adaptation Syndrome, or GAS. There are 3 stages. Phase 1 was an alarm reaction, mobilize resources. Phase 2 is resistance, you cope with the stressor. And phase 3 is exhaustion, your reserves are depleted. So this curve, the body's resistance to stress, can only last so long before exhaustion sets in. So alarm is phase 1. In phase 1, an alarm reaction occurs as the sympathetic nervous system is suddenly activated. The heart rate zooms and blood is diverted to the skeletal muscles. Feelings of faintness, of shock may occur. Resources are mobilized and fight, flight, or freeze is activated. Stage 2, or phase 2, is resistance. This is when temperature, blood pressure, and respiration remain high. The adrenal glands pump hormones into the bloodstream. All resources are summoned to meet the challenge. As time passes, with no relief from stress, the body's reserves begin to dwindle. And the last phase is phase 3, which is exhaustion. With exhaustion, the body becomes more vulnerable to illness, or even in extreme cases, collapse and death. Be able to differentiate Walter Cannon's fight or flight theory and Hans Selye's general adaptation syndrome. These have been heavily tested on the AP exam in the past. All right, moving on. What are other ways humans respond to stress? We respond to stress in lots of ways. One response is common after a loved one's death. Withdraw, pull back, conserve energy. Faced with an extreme disaster, such as a ship sinking, some people become paralyzed by that fear. What is the tend and befriend response? Another, found often among women, is to give and receive support, what's called the tend and befriend response. Facing stress, men more often than women tend to withdraw socially, turn to alcohol, or become emotionally insensitive. Women more often respond to stress by nurturing and banding together. What are health psychology and psychoneuroimmunology? Health psychology is a subfield of psychology that provides psychology's contribution to behavioral medicine. Psychoneuroimmunology is a study of how psychological, neural, and endocrine processes together affect the immune system and therefore the resulting health. How is stress and illness studied? To study how stress and healthy and unhealthy behaviors influence health and illness, psychologists and physicians created the interdisciplinary field of behavioral medicine, integrating behavioral and medical knowledge. How does the stress response work? Well, the immune system is a complex surveillance system. When it functions properly, it maintains health by isolating and destroying bacteria, viruses, and other invaders. 4 types of cells are active in searching for and destroying invaders in the body: B and T lymphocytes, macrophages, and natural killer cells. So if we look at the right-hand side, the possible responses. Send in the B lymphocytes, such as this one shown in front of a macrophage. Send in the T lymphocytes. Send in the macrophages. And send in natural killer cells, such as these two shown attacking a cancer cell. How does stress increase vulnerability to disease? Surgical wounds heal more slowly in stressed out people. Stressed people are more vulnerable to colds. Stress can hasten the course of disease. What does the research show? When researchers dropped a cold virus into people's noses, 40% of those living stress-filled lives developed colds. Let's look at it. So in one experiment, dental students received punch wounds, precise small holes punched in the skin. Compared with wounds placed during summer vacation, those placed 3 days before a major exam healed 40% more slowly. Does stress cause cancer? Stress does not create cancer cells, but in a healthy, functioning immune system, lymphocytes, macrophages, and NK cells search out and destroy cancer cells and cancer damaged cells. If stress weakens the immune system, might this weaken a person's ability to fight off cancer? Well, what does the research show? Experimenters implanted tumor cells in rodents or gave them carcinogens, which are cancer-producing substances. They then exposed some rodents to uncontrollable stress, such as inescapable shocks, which weaken their immune systems. Stressed rodents compared with their unstressed counterparts developed cancer more often, experienced tumor growth sooner, and grew larger tumors. Why are some of us more prone to coronary heart disease than others? About 610,000 Americans die annually from heart disease. High blood pressure and a family history of the disease increase the risk. So do smoking, obesity, an unhealthy diet, physical inactivity, and a high cholesterol level. Stress and personality play a big role in heart disease. The more psychological trauma people experience, the more their bodies generate inflammation, which is associated with heart and other health problems, including depression. What studies have been conducted? In a classic study, Meyer-Friedman, Ray Rosenman, and their colleagues tested the idea that stress increases vulnerability to heart disease by measuring the blood cholesterol level and clotting speed of 40 U.S. male tax accountants at different times of year. What were the results? From January through March, the test results were completely normal. But as the accountants began scrambling to finish their clients' tax returns before the April 15th filing deadline, their cholesterol and clotting measures rose to dangerous levels. In May and June, with the deadline passed, the measures returned to normal. For these men, stress predicted heart attack risk. Friedman and Rosenman launched a longitudinal study of more than 3,000 healthy men, aged 35 to 59. The researchers interviewed each man for 15 minutes, noting his work and eating habits, manner of talking, and other behavior patterns. After the interviews, the subjects were classified as having either type A or type B personalities. What characterizes a type A personality. The subjects in Friedman and Rosenman's study who seemed the most reactive, competitive, hard driving, impatient, time conscious, super motivated, verbally aggressive, and easily angered, they called type A. Type B, the roughly equal number of men in Friedman and Rosenman's study were more easygoing and relaxed. They were called type B. What were the findings of the longitudinal study? 9 years later, 257 men had suffered heart attacks, and 69% of them were type A. Moreover, not one of the type Bs, the most mellow and laid back of their group, had suffered a heart attack. Why are type A personalities more prone to coronary heart disease? Further research demonstrates that type A's toxic core is negative emotions, especially the anger associated with an aggressively reactive temperament. What physiological changes occur when angry? So when challenged, our active sympathetic nervous system redistributes blood flow to our muscles, pulling it away from our internal organs. The liver, which normally removes cholesterol and fat from the blood, can't do its job. Thus, excess cholesterol and fat may continue to circulate in the blood and later get deposited around the heart. Hostility also correlates with other risk factors such as smoking, drinking, and obesity. Does mood impact coronary heart disease? A Harvard School of Public Health research team found pessimistic men at doubled risk of developing coronary heart disease over a 10-year period. What is catharsis? Given the connection between chronic hostility, as in the type A personality, and heart disease, it's clear we need strategies for anger management. In Western cultures, many believe we can achieve emotional release or catharsis through aggressive action or fantasy. Catharsis usually fails to cleanse our rage. More often, expressing anger breeds more anger. For one thing, it may provoke further retaliation, causing a minor conflict to escalate into a major confrontation. For another, expressing anger can magnify anger. What are ways to diffuse anger? Wait, which is reducing the level of physiological arousal of anger by waiting. What goes up must come down. Find a healthy distraction or support. Calm yourself by exercising, playing an instrument, or talking it through with a friend. And distance yourself. Try to move away from the situation mentally as if you're watching it unfold from a distance. Does stress cause illness? Stress may not directly cause illness, but it does make us more vulnerable by influencing our behaviors and our physiology.